We will now have a look at the List.mapFold function. And we've already looked at the fold function itself and the map function that both are inherent to the list library. I won't go through the details of those today, but we will require knowledge of them for the discussion. So if you don't know how they work yet, please check out the videos that I have on those. Just to recap, I'm going to quickly implement a fold functionality and a map functionality, and then we'll take it from there with this new mapFold function. So for this, we're going to need a list. We're going to create one, and we're just going to call it list, and we're going to let it be very simple. Let's do 5, 7, 9, like that. What I'll do first is I'll implement a fold functionality on this. So I'm going to let my fold function of parameters a and b be equal to, let's just do a times b, like that. And I can implement a variable called myFold if I want to. What I'll do here is I'll apply the List.fold function, and the argument that I'll provide here is my fold function that I just created. An initial argument, which I'll let be 1, and then the list. Okay, let me execute this and we'll see what we get. Okay, we can see that we get 315, and the way we would get to that answer is by multiplying the number 1 with 5, leaves us with 5, then 5, which is the new output, times 7, which is 35, and then 35 times 9, which is 315. So that's the fold functionality, and as I said before, we should already be familiar with that functionality. I'll also implement now a map functionality, so I'm going to let map function, function 1 of a and b just be equal to string, let's see, string b squared, let's say. So I'm just using the b argument in this one. I'm not using a times b, I'm just doing b squared. And we'll see that in a second, or see why I do that in a second. So we're going to let my map, which is our variable that we define for a mapping, it's going to be list, let's see, list.map, like that. And we're going to provide our arguments. Now, the first argument I'm going to provide is map function 1, but partially applied. So you see that we have 2 input arguments here, and you might have been a bit confused why I put 2 input arguments, because you're used to using the list.map with single parameter functions. The reason why I'm doing 2 is because the function that we're going to introduce takes 2 arguments. Now, for the first argument here, I'm just going to provide a 0. So a is going to be 0, and that has no effect on our output because it only takes the b variable into account. So we have a partially applied function like that, and then we'll provide the list here. So if I execute this now, we can see what we get. Okay, so we can see that the outputs that we get are 25, 49, and 81. And that's what we will get if we square these ones. So 5 squared is 25, 7 squared is 49, 9 squared is 81. No big surprises here. What we'll move on to now is an implementation of the mapFold function. So the mapFold function is another function that exists in the list library. And this one combines these 2 functionality types into one function application that both does mapping and folding at the same time. To see how we implement this, let me define another map function as well. So I'm going to let map function 2 of a and b be equal to a string, just to make it more clear what happens in the evaluation. What I'm going to say is mapping the elements, and then we'll provide the first variable here, and then we'll provide the second one, like that. So this should be a plus, like that. So we're just printing whatever variables we use in the mapping. What I want to do now is I'm going to say let compound mapping 1 be a function of a and b, and this will be the function that we need for our mapFold functionality. And this one will simply be an aggregation of the 2 functions that we have. So we just put them together in a tuple kind of structure to make it easier. So we would do map function, and then we'll use the second one on a and b, and then just comma fold function a b. Okay, so we're just putting them together in a structure. We're not really doing anything fancy with them. And let's now apply this List.mapFold function. So it looks like this, map fold. There we go. What we need to provide first is our compound mapping, like that. Then we need to provide an initial value. We're going to just say this is 2. And then we will provide our list. Let me now execute all of this, and we'll see what we get, and then we'll interpret the results. Okay, so the parts that are interesting are at the bottom here. We can see that the output of the evaluation is first this list of 3 strings, and finally the output 630. So let's think about what happens. We can see that first of all, this list has the same length as the input list. So we have some form of mapping going on here that takes our input list and produces a new output list based on those values, and that we would expect because we provided a map function. And you can see that the elements being used in the beginning are the elements 2 and 5. The element 2 here corresponds to the initial value that we provided, and the element 5 corresponds to the first element of the list. So the map function gets applied to firstly the initial value that goes into the A variable here, and then the first element of the list that goes into the B variable. Once this has happened, the output of this is going to be 10. So we multiply 2 and 5 and get the value 10. Now the reason why I say that is because our fold function, if you remember, takes the arguments A and B and multiplies them together. So fold function here of A and B multiplies A and B. So we apply or we map the elements 2 and 5. That's sort of the mapping output of the first evaluation. And then in addition to that, so on the side, we apply the fold function where we multiply them, and that gives a number 10 or a result of 10 as a consequence. What we do in the second version of the application is we use this 10 that we evaluated from the fold function, and we use it as the first argument in our mapping function. So you can see that 10 becomes the new argument that we have as an input here. And then we map that together with the second argument of our list, which is 7. You can see that up here. So you can see what we're doing here. We're taking the initial value first, 2, and then the first element of the list, 5. We apply the fold function to that, and then we make that the new input in our next iteration of the map function. So again, we have now in the second iteration of the map function, a mapping of the elements 10 and 7. If we think about the application of the fold function to these arguments, that's going to be 10 times 7, which is 70. And if you look at the next input argument to our mapping function, that is also what we have here, so 70. And finally, the last element of the list that we apply is 9, like that. And if we multiply these two together, we get the final output, the final fold output of 630. Okay? So again, to reiterate, we take 2 arguments in each step of our evaluation when we use this map-fold function. We have one mapping that simply spits out what the output is given these 2 input arguments. And then we have a fold function that provides an argument, in this case by multiplying them together, and which makes it the first input of the map function in the next iteration. Now, you might be asking yourself, why would we actually need this function? And it's useful whenever we want to iterate over an array and do sort of the fold operation. So if you think about an application of the fold operation, that might be, for example, if we're aggregating some values. But let's say we have a list of values, we want to aggregate them, but in addition to aggregating them, we want to do some manipulation of the aggregated value and print some result or log some result or do something with it. For that, it can be useful to combine these two, and that's what the map-fold function does. So I hope that clarifies the application. If you have questions regarding the application of this function, I would be interested to hear them in the comments, because I know this one is quite involved, this function. And yeah, if you have any questions, please reach out, and I'm happy to answer those for you. So thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.